Welcome back to Thru the Ringer. I'm your host, Tate Frazier, and as always, joining us today on this beautiful Wednesday, it is Cousin Sal. Sal, good to see you, man.
Great to see you, buddy. I'm glad you say welcome back. You just assume people watched last week and they're back for more, but we may have a couple of first-time viewers. Well, I have it on good authority.
You're right. Shout out to the first-time viewers. Hopefully they had a happy Thanksgiving, and welcome to the show. It's called Thru the Ringer. Myself and Cousin Sal, we make sense of the biggest stories in sports, and we start every single show, at least this season, with First Tate, where I give you some takes from the weekend, and we start here, Sal. We had a lot of football to watch, a lot of food to digest, and I wanted to say this to you. Football is in its purest form when it's played in the snow. There was nothing like watching that Buffalo Bills game in the snow. They're shoveling the ball back to each other. It just felt like the best of times, and I came away from that game. Some people were talking about domes, talking about how we may never see games like this in the future. We need a future where we have football in the snow because it's the best version of the game.
Wow. All right. The best, the purest. You know what's pure? The sun. The sun is pure, pretty pure. The thing. Let's play under that.
We do need the sun. That's true. Yeah.
I don't want to be an old man curmudgeon here, but I feel like the dentist, I could see the snow games 3 times a year. Maybe it's because I grew up in a coldish weather environment. I went to school where there was a lot of snow, so I start to get antsy if there's too much of it. And I said it on Simmons, the problem with the snow games, Tate, is it's either 38-3 or 6-3. You know, you get like no in between. Guys falling all over the place. But I could see why you like it. I could see why some of the, with the less developed palates enjoy the snow. So you like the Frozen movie, right? So that's why you're a millennial.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I'm out there. I'm looking for Olaf the entire game, so I don't know when that broadcast is going to start. But I think you're right. It's something about I'm from the South, so the fascination of the snow, you don't get to see it as much, so maybe that plays into it. So I'll say it's purest form, but it's not the best form, as you wanted to point out. Let's talk about Jameis Winston, because he's the purest form of a gunslinger, and he's so good, Sal, that I think he might be on the Mount Rushmore of gunslingers. Obviously, when you hear the term, we immediately think of Brett Favre. There's been some names thrown out like Matthew Stafford in more recent times, but gunslinger is really exactly what Jameis Winston is. If you throw the pick sixes in and the third interception as well, he had 668 total yards in this game. Wow. And that is just the ultimate gunslinger thing to do. And he is a guy who has the right attitude and the right approach to the game of football to be considered one of the greatest gunslingers of all time.
I agree. I think he's up there. Jeff George is up there. He puts Baker Mayfield to shame. He was the modern day gunslinger. But now you're right. And this is a guy who doesn't need snow, Tate. He just goes out there. It doesn't matter what the weather is. Like you said, he could go from winning to covering to losing the cover to losing on a teaser for bettors just like within 3 minutes. He's spectacular. He's a lot of fun. I would not want him on my team. I don't want to root like that, but he's like shooting a Friday Night Lights reboot pilot, and all the outtakes are included. God bless Jameis Winston. And the pre- and post-game press conferences are terrific.
He makes you think that football is fake. You know how they do this with wrestling, where they're like, this is all scripted, this is all made up. When you watch Jameis Winston, you're like, there's no way that someone actually could do this without a script coordinator. But that is just the beauty of the Jameis Winston experience. Last thing, Sal, you mentioned teams. My team is the North Carolina Tar Heels, and I'm saying to you, it's time they make the phone call to Bill Belichick. That's right. They need a new head coach. Mac Brown retired. They need to turn to another 73-year-old and say, take the keys. There's only been 3 coaches to win a Super Bowl and a college national championship: Barry Switzer, Jimmy Johnson, and Pete Carroll. He can be the 4th one. He can be on the Mount Rushmore of the greatest coaches of all time. I know everybody talks about the Shula record. I think that Bill Belichick needs to come back to college, win the big one. His dad coached at North Carolina. He loves Chapel Hill. Let's give him the keys, Sal. Let's bring him to Chapel Hill and let him coach the football team.
All right, listen, I'm not going to get in the way of this because I know you would like this. This would be a lot of fun. I feel like Drake May went to the Patriots.
Little trade here, right?
Yeah, a little bit of a trade after the fact thing, but I feel like he would say no in a heartbeat. I feel like, well, what does he want? He wants to break the NFL record. Those Carolina wins don't transfer to the NFL, right? So he still wouldn't break that record. And you'd have to convince him that he could win a national championship there in a conference that is not recognized by the NCAA. They're not. You're going to get probably one
champion, Sal. That's all we need. One championship. Yeah.
All right. I wish you luck. I feel like a beat reporter should ask him so that the school itself isn't embarrassed if they reach out.
Well, we're going to call, and he's going to ignore that phone call, but we're going to point out that we did call, Sal. That's all you can do. You got to make him say no.
Answer.
That's the point of all these searches. Let's now play my favorite game. Let's turn to over-under reactions. I read a saying, a phrase, a thought to you, and you tell me how crazy it is or how proper and correct it is. And let's start here. Let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. He's got a documentary coming out. But I say to you, Sal, Aaron Rodgers hosting a podcast is the lock of 2025. Over or under reaction? Your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers going to the podcast space?
How about who cares? How about over, under, or who cares? Can we say that? I don't. Of course, let him do a podcast from the Amazon, the jungles in the Amazon. Let him do it, and then people, the producer, can be like, yeah, sure, we got a signal, Aaron. Just keep talking. Say something smart. He's so smart. He's so well read. I wish someone would write a book about how to not look like a zombie in the pocket playing quarterback. Then if you'd be well read on that, maybe they'd be competitive, the Jets. But I've had enough. And God help those poor Jet fans if he's back next year wearing the Gotham green and white.
Yeah, I heard a lot of people saying they might put tariffs on podcast equipment, so that could hurt this. But we'll see what happens. Next up, Sal, Kirk Cousins has a better chance to win Comeback Player of the Year next season. Over or under reaction?
I get it. I get what you're saying. I think it's an underreaction. Although, Tate, I would still like some clarification on some of these fringe awards. Like, can Cooper Flagg win the Wooden Award at not yet 18 years old?
Yes, he can. Yeah, he can.
He can. All right. Can Cousins win? Can some of these guys win the Comeback Player of the Year if they just sucked and aren't coming back from an injury?
The Joe Flacco, as we like to call it, right?
The Joe Flacco, right. I'm not sure. But anyway, underreaction. I feel like you have to throw little harder than 36 miles per hour. I would give this award to DeMar Hamlin 6 years in a row before I gave it to Kirk. DeMar Hamlin, by the way, could probably throw harder than Kirk Cousins at this point. So I'm going to say underreaction. He can't win it this year.
And he deserves one of those awards, you know what I mean? So eventually we got to give him one. So maybe this could be the year. Next up, Sal, a team in a city we've been talking about quite a bit, Chicago. I say to you, Chicago should be more ashamed of their hot dog than their football team. Over or underreaction? Your thoughts?
My thoughts is this is an underreaction.
Wow.
The Bears, because they're predictable, right? Like, even as it might be a shocking ending to you, I don't know. No, nothing shocks me with them. Whether it's a block kick, field goal, whether it's a Hail Mary, whether they get one playoff in the last 31 seconds, whatever, it's the Bears that are going to lose. The hot dog, the Chicago hot dog, still shocks me in a way that I become physically ill when I see it. Poppy seed bun, all right, trying too hard. Yellow mustard, what are we, 4, Tate? Come on, give me a break. White onions, relish, pickles. It's like they reached into the garbage disposal and made a hot dog, and it's disgraceful to me. And the worst part, there's no coach to fire. It's just, you just have to live with it.
Yeah, you just have to live with it, and I will say it's supposed to be easy to eat a hot dog. There's too many ingredients. That's the number one problem with what's going on there. So I think it's a very fair point, and hopefully Chicago can find a head coach very soon. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. The 24 Bengals are the biggest waste of talent since Ocean's 13, Sal. Over or under reaction? Obviously, a great year for Joe Burrow, but the results are not there as far as wins and losses.
Yeah, you're right. I'll read you a stat. Well, I think my pal, the late, great Super Dave Osborne, was in that one, Ocean's 13. Great talent. They didn't use him right. You're correct. But the Bengals are 4-8. 6 quarterbacks in history have had numbers like Burrow, where it's 30 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. And the worst record out of all those 6 was our pal Aaron Rodgers at 9-3. Everyone else either had 2 losses, 1 loss, or 0 losses. I don't even know what kind of Christmas gift Lou Anarumo, who starts up that defense, should get Burrow at this point. He could start with the Lexus with the big ribbon in the driveway, but I don't even think that's good enough.
It all started with the haircuts, Hal. It was moving in the wrong direction from the start of the season. We can talk about that at a later date. Let's talk about another team in the division. I say to you, Justin Tucker is going to cost the Baltimore Ravens a playoff game. 70% kicking this year, worst of his career. Over or under reaction?
I'm going to say underreaction. I think he does cost them a playoff game. They have 5 losses. They've lost 5 games by 25 total points, and he's cost them 25 points in those games. So whatever. Maybe he just doesn't have it anymore. It's hard to kick a ball. It's hard when you're getting older to kick a ball. Anybody who tried it on Thanksgiving in their backyard knows this is true. I do think they could lose a game against the Steelers. It could be like a real knuckleball type game, 18-16. He comes out there in the cold, misses a field goal in the first round of the playoffs, and worse yet, he hits that upright. He should really put a silencer on the ball, Tate, because it really makes it's actually louder when it hits the upright, so it makes it look even worse. So I feel bad for Tucker, but he has a wonderful career in opera awaiting him.
Yeah, and I saw some people talking about technically he's been so sound, but it does feel like it's a mental thing, which maybe even is more worrisome if you're a fan of the Baltimore Ravens, that it isn't something that he's doing fundamentally. It is something that is in his head, and that's what happens with kickers. Eddie Pinheiro, he was the most accurate kicker in football until he wasn't. He started missing kicks because the pressure got to him mentally.
But now he is again because Tucker sucks, right?
Yeah, right.
So, Pinheiro's having fun rooting against Tucker.
It's a snip-snap scenario there with these kickers. Nobody wants to be the most accurate kicker of all time. Let's talk about a guy, maybe the least accurate fantasy pick of all time. Christian McCaffrey, Sal, was the most disappointing fantasy pick of the decade. Over or underreaction. Not his fault, but obviously not a great year for McCaffrey.
I know. I'm going to say underreaction. McCaffrey owners, unfortunately, got buried with him in the snowdrift in Buffalo. It really might be that, but that whole first round was a bust pretty much, right? You had, remember all summer we were like, who's it going to be? McCaffrey, Tyreek,
Breece Hall.
CD, Breece Hall, forget Justin Jefferson, not that great. So I didn't have any of those guys, Tate, and I still managed to not make the playoffs in like 6 of my 7 leagues. So fantasy sucks. Over underreaction, much better game than fantasy football.
Yeah, I think that's going to be our over or underreaction next week. We're just going to focus on all things fantasy, and we'll break it all down. Next up, Sal, now that James Harden has made 3,000 three-pointers, it's officially time for the NBA to move back the line. Over or underreaction. Can we do this? Can this happen?
I'm going to say overreaction because the time was probably 7 years ago when Steph Curry released clips of him before the game, like heaving half quarters, and he made like a dozen in a row. Like, all right, listen, it's boring when they miss. I think there's a clip going around led by LeBron missing where there's like 8 in a row misses, and it's boring when they make it. That's where the NBA has a problem. It's now become boring when teams make the threes, and our boss Bill Simmons laid it out pretty perfectly in a tweet. Celtics don't miss their threes. They have 4 losses. They could have won all 4 of those games. That's the difference here. So, yes, move the line back or something.
Yeah, and we hear the word variance way too much for it to be about basketball games. It acts like, I feel like we're all statisticians at this point. Next up, you mentioned the Lakers. Let's talk about Father Time, Sal. Father Time is officially and finally catching up with LeBron James. Over or underreaction. Has not been playing like the LeBron we have expected to see, even though he is 40 years old.
Right. I'm going to say overreaction. There's father time. Is there a son time too? Should Ronnie look out? No?
Yeah.
There's just father time. I'll say overreaction. I know he scored 10 the other night and people are all over him, but he had 27 the night before, the game before. He's still logging 35 minutes a game. It's still kind of amazing what he does. Is it possible he just overdosed on sweet potato pie taco on Tuesday and that's it? Had a bad day? I don't know. I guess we'll see in the next couple of weeks. I don't want to defend LeBron. That's worse than the way he defended the NBA Cup, but I will say overreaction.
Well, I will say whenever people tend to doubt him, that is when he bounces back. So it's always at the lowest point when LeBron James finds a way. So don't count him out just yet. Next up, Sal, if this were last year, the NCAA committee would have just taken the 4 teams in the SEC and the Big Ten championship games to make the playoffs. Over or underreaction or proper reaction? This feels pretty proper to me.
I think it's proper. I could see there being an all-out Irish war when Notre Dame is left out because the SEC played and the Big Ten played their conference championship games. And I don't know, the ACC winner we know doesn't have a chance, right, in that top 4 scenario. So I don't know if Georgia and Oregon had lost in their championship games. I could see them taking both over Notre Dame. So there's still that possibility. We'll talk about Alabama, I think, later. It could get crazy.
Yeah, I think it was the perfect timing for the 12 team because if it was those 4 and that's who they ended up putting in the old version of the playoff, like you said, there was going to be some chaos, some ruckus, whatever you want to call it. Last one, Sal. Teams should be allowed to plant their flag on their rival's home field if they win a road rivalry game. Over or underreaction? Obviously, this weekend, sportsmanship was thrown out the window and we had brawls galore all over the place.
Yeah. I would say that's an underreaction. I think they should be allowed. They should be allowed to try, and then the home team should be allowed to fight for their turf, I think. I think it's actually working out, minus the pepper spray. I think it's working out exactly how it should. Maybe because of the pepper spray, everybody wears like masks, and then the flag accidentally gets impaled in the AD's mother's eye or something. But I don't know. I still like it. You don't want to see anyone get seriously hurt in these. But it's a turf war. It's a turf battle. I just wish Ohio State, for the sake of my money line parlay, would have tried as hard during the game as they did defending their turf.
And speaking of turf, Sal, you can't even plant these flags into the turf. So there you go. They can't even do that, physically impale the flag into the ground, which is also the funny part of the whole thing. And speaking of how to celebrate and make your rivals deal with the defeat, let's call up the Riverboat captain. Let's do some prop culture here. And the Riverboat captain is asking us, Sal, the best new way to celebrate beating a rival. Let's look at the odds right here. The favorite losers are forced to sing the winner's fight song at 3-1. The winner is gifted the opposing team's mascot at 25-1. In fact, we saw two mascots fighting this week in Arizona State and Arizona. That was fun to see.
That was crazy. One of them was fighting. Yeah.
One of them was fighting, right. Cheerleaders must enter the transfer portal at 50-1, and the losing coach is forced to cuddle with Lee Corso at 100-1. You can also get the field at even odds. What say you, Sal?
These are all pretty good. I would like to see all of these put in a hat, and then at the end of the game, we just see which goes. But, usually I like to go field and collect on the even odds, but 100-1 is a long shot. I like that the losing coach has to shack up with Lee Corso. I really imagine Ryan Day having to canoodle with Lee while listening to boring old man stories for like 8 hours, and then maybe like Lee taunts him with the giant Wolverine hat, puts it on, and then Ryan Day has to smother him to death. Oh, it would be terrific. I would go with that for 100-1.
I like that. Lou Holtz also could be someone he has to cuddle with as well. I think that would be his nightmare. I'm going to go with singing the fight song because they got to learn the fight song. I know it's the favorite there, Sal, but just the idea that the other team has to learn your fight song and sit out there and try to sing it back to the crowd, and then the fans get to laugh at them as they sing their fight song. I think that's a nice moment, and it doesn't lead to a fight. It doesn't lead to pepper spray, and everybody leaves the game, and nobody's actually hurt. So I think that's what we're going for here.
They should hire us as consultants.
Right.
We really, I would do it for free. I don't care. We have a million ideas like
Should we start a company, the Sports Consultants, where we go in and we tell these people what to do? That could be fun. Let's set something up.
Let's do it. We'll get LeBron's agent on the phone right now.
I'm going to call him right now. We're going to do that during the break. You stay tuned. We'll be right back on the other side with Cousin Sal. We're going to do some line look-aheads and some track to the futures. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thru the Ringer. We're here with Cousin Sal, and we are doing our best to make sense of what's happening in the NFL. We just had Thanksgiving, and now we are turning towards December. Sal, how you feeling? Do you feel like we actually know who these teams are at this point, or are you still in a fact-finding phase? Where are you right now with the NFL?
No, I'm in a fact-finding phase, and I'm nervous that the season's coming to an end soon. We're going to be talking about Cooper Flag forever, and I'm not ready for it. I'm not either. I'm having fun talking football. We got 5 great games ahead. There's still a lot to get to, and it starts with Thursday Night Football. And let's look at the line look ahead here. We got the Packers traveling to Detroit to take on the Lions. Lions minus 3.5 in this one. The total 51.5. Obviously a divisional showdown. Lions are great at home. The Packers are road warriors. The Lions are talking about playing 4 guys that they've never even played on defense. This is a very kind of wacky game. It's hard to figure out what this is going to look like. But what say you, Sal? What do you see in this game? Well, for weeks now, we've been talking about the Lions are going to the Super Bowl. This is the most complete team. They just barrel. They bust teams up. In fact, I really, really, really started believing in them like a month ago when they went to Lambeau and won 24-14. It was in crappy weather. Like, wow, they could really do this anywhere. But since then, Tate, you mentioned the big injuries on defense for Detroit. And Green Bay has gotten better. Since then, they've averaged about 30 points per game. So that's why the spread is 3.5 for this team that everybody thinks is going to be a 1 seed and run away with it instead of 4 or 5. Green Bay may not win, but I'm looking at them on a teaser, getting close to double digits. In a place where they stole a game last year. Remember, on Thanksgiving, they went to Detroit and won. So tease Green Bay with a bunch of teams. Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay should win. The Bengals over my Cowgirls. It should all work.
Do you feel like this is going to be one of those gamesmanship games where both sides are maybe not trying to show too much of their hand as they forecast potentially a playoff matchup? If the Packers had to go back to Detroit, if you're the Lions, you don't want to win this game. You don't want to go all out in this game if you want to wait to the playoff. Like, is there any sort of the gamesmanship that goes on here, or should we just expect a good football game?
So you're saying you'd bet against Jordan Love planting a flag anytime soon in the midfield?
Or he'll just wait to the playoffs to plant his flag, as we've seen him do.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, Green Bay showed they could do it on the road in Dallas, which at that time was a tough place to win. So I don't think they were too worried.
Yeah, don't get too high if you win this game in a landslide victory if you're the Detroit Lions, because I do feel like the Packers are going to play a little bit coy, but we'll see what happens. We got some player props. What do you like in this game, Sal?
Josh Jacobs over 67.5. It went down from 69.5. I think we hear about Josh Jacobs this month in the same breath as Saquon Barkley and Derek Henry. Maybe not the same breath. Maybe there's like a hesitation, like a hiccup, but I think
a pregnant pause per se.
Very good. A little pregnant pause there. It's going to be a good December for him, though. He's been good. He's gone over 70 in 5 of his last 6 games, including 95 in that first matchup we talked about, Tate, in versus Detroit. So look at him to go over 67.5.
Yeah, I think the running backs are going to be the stars of the playoffs, and the fact that Josh Jacobs is playing good football right now and running the ball really well is very encouraging for the Packers, so I like that. On the flip side, I'm going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown anytime touchdown plus 105. It just feels like he finds a way to get to the end zone, especially in these games within the division. He has his podcast going. He's a little bit cocky on the podcast. I listen to it. St. Brown feels like a guy that's locked in for this Thursday night game. He wants to send a message around the rest of the NFL that Detroit is the real deal, sitting at 11-1 right now. So
scored against them the first game.
Right.
Good job.
That's what he does.
Way to get open.
That's what he does, Sal. So I like it. Let's track to the future now. Let's talk big picture. Let's talk NFL MVP. Josh Allen, it does feel like coming off this past weekend, everybody is talking about Josh Allen. Josh Allen, the MVP. It's just a conversation point. But your thoughts on where the race is right now, and I know you got some money on Jared Goff.
Yeah, I do. And it was looking good for a while. But then he had that 5-interception game against Houston. And even though they won, there just seems like there's no coming back from him. At least FanDuel agrees. It's 15-1 now, so I'm going to have to eat that. But Allen at minus 280 really should wrap this up in the next couple of weeks. Lamar kind of went away a little bit.
Yeah.
The question is going to be Barkley against Allen, and here's what Allen has going for him. He's not a running back, okay? So he's a quarterback, and those are the guys that win. He's got the numbers, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 6 rushing touchdowns. That's pretty good. He's got the team that's going to end up with 13 or 14 wins, and he's got the highlight tape now. He threw a ball that he ended up catching for a touchdown. So he's a fantasy darling. SportsCenter will rerun that forever. And he's got the story. He and Jerry Seinfeld's daughter, or whoever that is, are getting married. So
yeah, right.
Everything going right for Josh.
Everything's going right. And Jim Nantz was very upset he could not call that the play of the year as soon as he saw that pitch back to Josh Allen for the touchdown. He right now sits at minus 280. But I did want to point out, Sal, Bill Simmons says this all the time, right side of history, right? You want to be on the right side of history with these awards as we look back on things. If Saquon does end up breaking the record by Dickerson, and we look back on this season and we're saying the guy who set the NFL rushing record was not deemed the most valuable player, do you think there's a world in which we're on the wrong side of history if Saquon is able to get that done?
Yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah, and I actually said that on the show with him. I said, if the running back who doesn't normally get it breaks a 40-year-old record, then maybe we should consider him or her.
Yeah, or her. Yeah, and again, we've had 3 running backs this century. Adrian Peterson did it, Sean Alexander, Marshall Faulk, so he would join that list. He'd be on his own Mount Rushmore of 21st century running backs, so we'll see what happens there. Let's track to the future and talk about 2 teams that are trying to make the playoffs. So, Sal, which team is the better bet to make the playoffs? And we're looking at the Arizona Cardinals and the Indianapolis Colts. Between those 2 teams, who do you like, Sal?
I think we matched them up because they're pretty similar in odds, right? I think they were both around plus 170. Now the Colts are around plus 196 now that the Broncos won. I'm surprised it's even that comparable, though. I would take the Cardinals. The Colts are 2 out of the wild card and 2 out of the division, and they have 4 games left. They're one of the teams on a bye this week, so they have 4 games left. Some of these other teams have 5 games to catch up. Cardinals back in the driver's seat, I think, with a win over Seattle. They're favored by 2.5, so they could get that done. I don't know. I take Arizona. I don't particularly like them at this point, but there could be some magic in Kyler's desert legs there. So I would go Arizona between the 2.
Yeah, I would go with Arizona as well. It does feel like Kyler Murray has some magic up his sleeve. He has a little bit of Russell Wilson in that sense where he can just kind of pull a rabbit out of a hat. I did want to ask you one thing. We were talking about the Colts and made me think about that Colts-Patriots game. They go for a 68-yard field goal at the end of that game. It was kicked dead on, ends up being short. But this is the year of the Hail Mary. Do you feel like they took a moment away from my guy Drake May by not letting him go for the Hail Mary where he can match with what we saw Daniels do earlier in the year? Do you think that he missed an opportunity there? Because as I was watching it live, Sal, I wanted the Hail Mary, the Hail May, or whatever they would call it when it finally happened.
Well, let's keep this in mind. This coach can do no right. So if he picked the Hail Mary, it would have been intercepted in return for a touchdown, or he would have got injured or something like that. So, but 68 does seem pretty far in the frigid Foxborough temperatures.
Yeah, that was not the move, not the call. And again, the year of the Hail Mary. So just a nice little aside. Let's track to the future. Let's turn to college football. I have a simple question for you, Sal, and I think we know the answer to this. Will Alabama make the playoffs? Yes, right now is minus 260. No, plus 196. What say you?
So Alabama was minus 120 to make the playoff 2 days after the weekend. Nothing had happened. Nobody had played.
They have not played anybody. No. Right. And nothing has changed.
It went to minus 260. So people are just like, hey, the SEC is going to screw everybody over. That's what's going to happen, and that's why it's that much. To me, it's very simple. It's that ACC championship game, SMU and Clemson. And I think if SMU loses, they should still be in the top 12, and Alabama should be out. Now, this is suggesting that maybe I'm wrong, I'm crazy, and that everybody wants Alabama as a 12 and Notre Dame as a 5, and what an opening round game that would be. So, I don't know, do we just go with it? Am I stupidly saying that Caitlin DeBar and Crimson Tide are going to get screwed over? Officially, I'll say yes, but we know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, it does feel like it's inevitable at this point in the brand of Alabama, and the idea of maybe them playing a Notre Dame in a first-round matchup does seem very enticing, but you're also going to have some infighting in the SEC, correct? Like South Carolina is going to put out there that they probably have a better case in their mind as far as how they're playing right now versus Alabama, so there could even be a situation where SEC teams are arguing against each other's resumes, and we don't even have this conference pride narrative that everyone's kind of pushing because two teams within the conference are going to be fighting each other for that one spot.
I just fall in love with the odds too much here. And FanDuel has South Carolina, and I agree. I could see their resume, and that was a big win over Clemson too. But they have them at 8-1, whereas they have Alabama at -2. So they're not both going to make it. And Alabama has the head-to-head win, and that has to count for something, I think.
Yeah, right. We're at the point now where head-to-head wins are almost secondary in the conversation.
Right.
That's how lost we are in this conversation, and that is quite the world that we live in with college football. Speaking of college football, let's do some upset special, Sal. This has been a specialty for you throughout the year. Not for me, but let's start with your pick because that's the one that people need to actually listen to.
All right, mine wasn't great. Northwestern hung with Illinois for a minute, and then it all got out of hand. Yuck. So I'm going to take Army plus 176. I'm flying the flag here, Tate, the American flag in the American Athletic Championship against Tulane, who had a rough go of it last week, but Army 8-0 in the conference. I know they got smoked in South Bend, and that's what's going to put a bad taste in everyone's mouth. Below freezing temps in West Point. I can't imagine Tulane has many fans there anyway. Quarterback Bryson Daly, 25 rushing touchdowns. He's perfected the triple option against these AAC teams. 24-19. I say the Black Knights pull off the upset, and everything is good with the country again.
I like that. I need Army to win this game. Also, there were some rumors that maybe Tulane's coach Summerall could be moving to Chapel Hill very soon, Sal, so he could be 1 foot out the door.
Over Bill Belichick's dead body.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Well, hey, first one who takes the job, Sal. Whoever says yes first can have it. Bill Belichick, Summerall, you decide. But I like that pick, Army, plus 176. I'm going to go with the Clemson Tigers. You can get them at plus money, plus 114. And the reason I like the Tigers is, one, I like the talent of this team, and two, this just feels like the most ACC thing possible for them to have a team like SMU that is the class of the season, the team that they can promote, and then have Clemson, who has been the class of the conference for over a decade, come in and kind of spoil the party a little bit, muddy the waters, have people wondering who should actually be in, and leaving the ACC in a situation where one team probably gets into the playoff, and that one team will still probably be SMU, but feels very Clemson to do that at plus 114. So my upsets, that would be great.
I mean, imagine if they said to Dabo, okay, I know we said that the conference champion gets an automatic bid into the group of 12, but we want South Carolina and Alabama in. I'm sorry, we're changing the rules. I think he would flip out a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Jim Phillips would have to do some more radio interviews for the ACC, Sal, to figure that out. It's going to be a bit of a mess. One more line look at here. Let's look at the conference championship player props. We've got a lot of good games this weekend. What do you like, Sal? What are you looking at?
I'm leaning Texas in that SEC championship game. They're a slight favorite, but player prop-wise, I'm going to go with Carson Beck for Georgia, 250-plus passing yards. I think it's minus 102. A little bit of revenge factor for Texas. So I think they jump out early, and then they force the Bulldogs to throw. Carson Beck, like I said, minus 102. He's gone over 230 in 4 of his last 5. And 250 actually 297 in 4 of his last 5. I'll get the numbers right. I think they play from behind, like I said, on the turf in the Dome at Atlanta. They got Clemson there earlier in the year, and he went for 278. Big game out of Dominic Levitt. Beck, 250 plus.
I like that pick. I think Georgia's going to have a really good game. Even though everyone's talking about a revenge game for Texas, I just think the talent level and Georgia being there with all their fans barking in the building, there's going to be a lot of momentum for Georgia. So I'm going to take Nate Frazier. No relation to me, but I'm going to take him first touchdown in this game, Sal, plus 490. Finish that Georgia Tech game with a nice 2-point conversion. Think he starts out this SEC championship game with a touchdown at plus 490. We'll take some good odds there. And
you know what? I'm going to change mine to Muzzin Sal then. First touchdown for Tulane.
Oh, man.
He's
one of my favorite players on Tulane. He's really good. Got great hands. Very low center of gravity. Last take, Sal, before we get out of here. The Tate debate. There has been a lot of conversation about NBA basketball and viewership and all of these types of things. Too many threes. Do we cap the amount of threes in the game? You mentioned that clip that's been surfacing around with the Lakers and going back and forth shooting threes. So I say to you, Sal, college basketball right now is a better viewing experience than the NBA. So if you're a fan of basketball, come tune into college basketball. It's basically semi-pro, high-profile games this week. SEC, ACC Challenge. Teams like Alabama going to Chapel Hill to face North Carolina. Teams like Auburn going to Cameron Indoor to face Duke. It's a great time to watch college basketball, Sal. And if you're done with the NBA, come on down. We welcome you. Come enjoy some real basketball.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I dare you to say it to Ringer.com's face. If you're so
I'll tweet it. Yeah, I'll put it on Blue Sky. I'm not afraid.
We'll say it in hushed tones, Tate. It's better. It's better,
yeah.
Right?
Come
college is better. High school's better. Middle school, there's a TikTok video of a 4-year-old dunking on a Nerf hoop and getting the hoop falling on his head. That's better until they move the threes back and until Joel Embiid doesn't, reluctantly play like a zombie, missing free throws. Give me Danny Hurley screaming into a towel for 2 hours over all of it.
Come on. It's great drama. It's great TV, and we want characters in the sport, and college basketball has the best characters. So if you're a fan of basketball, come watch the game. Come join us. We're having a good time. Sal, where can we watch all your great work, and then we'll let you go enjoy the rest of your day?
Thank you. Against all odds, the Ringer pregame show there is on Sunday, and Cousin Sal's winning weekend with Boomer Esiason and the Parlay Kid this week.
There you go. 2 superstars right there. Go check out Cousin Sal's winning weekend. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to have the Ringers' Diante Lee help us make sense of what's happening in the NFL. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back to Thru the Ringer. I'm your host, Tate Frazier, and joining us now, it is the Ringers' very own Diante Lee. He's back on the show. Diante, good to see you, man. How are you?
Good to see you. I feel like the last time we talked, there was a lot of ideas out in the air. We weren't sure how a lot of these football seasons were going to go for these teams, and we're hitting a point now where teams have eliminated themselves in the NFL and in college ball, and we can kind of focus on what matters. So it's good to be here to kind of wrap that conversation up.
Yeah, there is a lot of speculation to start the season. As I like to tell people, I like to react to things, not predict things. We like to be in the reactions business. So now we have enough of a sample size to react to things, and probably the biggest reaction that we're getting in football right now is about the Buffalo Bills. Everybody is talking about Buffalo. It does seem like it is Josh Allen's year, but is it Buffalo's year? Do you feel like this is a team that they can finally push through and at least get to the Super Bowl? I'm not going to go all the way as far as to say they're going to win the Super Bowl, but can they get past the Chiefs and can they finally get there to the Super Bowl?
I thought they could last year, and I think that they're in a similar position this season as well. I think that they have finally built a roster that is balanced enough around Josh Allen that they can protect him from some of his worst traits, which do pop up at times. You saw those back-to-back losses against Houston and Baltimore in the first month of the season, where it seemed like things might be a little bit rocky without Stephon Diggs. But they've really been able to kind of rally around this run game, bring in Amari Cooper, and I think that right now they're in a really good position to be able to dominate teams, and they should be the AFC front runner as it stands right now.
Yeah, and Josh Allen is viewed as the MVP right now, rightfully so, and he is playing MVP level football. He's had some plays of the year. Jim Nantz famously called it on that fourth down, and then in the snow, we get the pitch back. So, like, he's had his quote-unquote Heisman moments, MVP moments, whatever it is, during his run this year. Do you feel like Josh Allen, this is kind of his coronation as far as, like, everybody, general audience knowing who he is as one of, if not the best quarterback in football?
I think it's come together perfectly for him to be an MVP this year and for that mantle of best overall player in the NFL to be handed to him. Right now, if I had to make a vote, it would be hard to argue against voting for Allen.
Yeah, it does feel like the Bills are America's team, the blue-collar version where everyone is backing the Bills, everyone's backing Josh Allen. And that brings me to the Ravens. You mentioned them because Lamar Jackson looked like he was trending towards his third MVP, but his kicker is letting him down. Never thought I would say that. I almost had to take a second there. Is Justin Tucker the biggest issue for the Baltimore Ravens right now? And if he isn't, what is the issue for this team?
I don't know if he's the biggest issue. I think that the mistakes that he makes stand out, right? And it comes back to, for as reductive as it can sound, kickers really only have one job. It's less about Lamar Jackson and more just about the environment around him is just falling apart in ways that ask him to be a superhero. And when he doesn't deliver, that's how you get the talk radio cycle over the last 48 hours where everybody's discussing whether or not he's as good as we think he is because the team's not winning games.
Yeah, and every single time we have the same conversation. Can he make these throws? Is he really that guy? Is he more of a running back? And we get back in the same sick cycle, even though we know how talented he is. But like you said, he gets in these moments where it's like, okay, go save us, Lamar. And you can't save the day every single time, especially when you get in these playoff environments and these points matter. And Justin Tucker, 70% this year. Previous low is 82.5. So he obviously is not kicking the ball like he typically does. But maybe we got some time for him to turn things around. Let's talk about their rivals in the AFC, the Steelers. They look really good right now. And even when they're down at halftime, it seems like they find a way to win these games. And I don't think anybody wants to play this team. How dangerous is Russell Wilson and this Pittsburgh team when it comes to the playoffs?
I mean, if Russell Wilson's going to look how he did on Sunday, I don't know how many ways you have available to beat the Steelers. That was one of the first times I've seen him look like that since leaving Seattle. And what I mean is patience in the pocket, taking what the defense gives and not just trying to chuck the ball into coverage, throwing the ball accurately in the middle of the field. All of these are factors that you hadn't really seen in maybe, a half decade from him. I think right now, and I might not have said this at any other point in the season, you kind of do have to start looking at them and say, hey, if they get to see a Kansas City, if they see a Baltimore, whether they're at home or on the road, you've got to think just by style of play, discipline, Mike Tomlin's ability to manage game situations, they're going to put themselves in a position to succeed. And then you layer on top the fact that Russell Wilson can always connect on those handful of deep 30, 35-yard passes down the field that end up being the difference in games for them. I'm really interested to see if they can do that again. They've got a tough stretch coming up between Philadelphia on the road. They've got to go on the road to Baltimore, and then they see Kansas City in the second to last week of the season. There's an opportunity for us to really kind of see where this team stands amongst the other contenders. But as it looks right now, you've got to take them seriously.
Absolutely. A lot of experience on that side of the football. And the Steelers, 520 yards of offense, the most since 2018 last week against Cincinnati. So obviously Russell Wilson's playing some good football. Anytime you see him throwing the long ball and showing some of that Russell Wilson magic that we saw from his early days, it does make you a little bit worried, especially if you're a team like Kansas City, who has just not been able to figure it out this season. Let's talk about the Chiefs. Are they trying to save some stuff for the playoffs? Are they playing some sort of coy game with the rest of the NFL? Or are we concerned that they're still trying to find out who they are this year as this team, as this version of the Chiefs?
If you would have asked me this maybe just like 3 weeks ago, I would have said this team's playing possum. They're not trying to show a lot. I think they're just trying to protect bodies to make sure they get to the playoffs healthy. And I do think that is a factor in why they're playing the way that they're playing. I think in a lot of ways you're seeing a version of this team that's similar to what they were in the Super Bowl against the Bucs a few years ago, where the defense is okay, but not as great as it could be at its best. I think that you're starting to see the loss of L'Jarius Sneed affect this team. They're not covering as well deep downfield. The run game has taken a couple steps back, and now you're seeing guys aren't separating as often, and now Patrick Mahomes has got to be perfect on third downs, and it looked great earlier in the year when every 3rd and 8 and 3rd and 9 was turning into a 1st and 10 for them. The second you see those things start to walk back a bit, you're really starting to see teams poke at some of the holes on this roster. So while you can't maybe dismiss them outright because of the fact that they are repeat champions and are still in position to have a home game in the playoffs at worst, if not be the top overall seed in the AFC, I think when you start talking about Pittsburgh, you talk about Baltimore, you talk about Buffalo, there is a lot of competition in the AFC in a way where there maybe wouldn't be. And I don't think that things are as safe for Kansas City as they thought it might have been when they kind of put together this plan to maybe kind of drag their feet up until the postseason.
Yeah, still the 1 seed right now, but they've been playing a lot of one-possession games, and they've been getting away with it. But when it comes to the playoffs, those things can turn very quickly, and you face a team like the Steelers, the Ravens, the Bills. I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the AFC, so it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for the team trying to go for the three-peat. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk more NFL with Diante Lee. Welcome back to Thru the Ringer. I'm here with Diante Lee, and we made some sense of the AFC. We're doing our best. There's still some games to play to wrap up this season in December, the best of times in football. But now we want to talk about the NFC, and specifically the NFC North. A lot of teams that have high hopes of making the Super Bowl. So I'll ask a general question. Obviously, the Chicago Bears are probably not going to be in this conversation, so they can put the earmuffs on. But will we see an NFC North team represent the NFC in the Super Bowl this season? We got 3 good options. Deontay, what say you?
I think that it's entirely possible. I just think that maybe my pick to come out of this division and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl wouldn't be what it's looked like for most of the season, if people can kind of catch what I'm suggesting there.
The last time we saw a team in the Super Bowl was obviously the Packers, so most people would lean that way. Do you feel like the Packers are the team that can make a run?
I think that they have the highest ceiling because they've got the best quarterback. And I try not to be reductive in analysis, but when you watch Jordan Love, when he's at his best, you see him in a cold weather game, Thanksgiving night against Miami, and he's able to rip the ball in the middle of the field. He can push the ball deep downfield. That team has the running game it needs. And I think that while their defense is not as good as what Detroit's been, you noted some of the injuries, and it feels, like you said, it feels like every week it's a corner, it's a safety, it's a pass rusher, a key position player is leaving the game, and I do think that at a certain point you have to be concerned about what the cumulative effect of those injuries will be. But even if those guys are healthy, I just feel like in a 1-game sample, if you give me Jordan Love and that Packers receiving core and what Josh Jacobs can do out of the backfield, I feel as good about them as I feel like the consensus feels about Detroit.
How do you feel about Philadelphia right now?
It's hard not to trust this team right now. I mean, you can make an argument that Philadelphia, despite not having, superstar names at pass rusher or at corner, that might be the best defense in football, at least over the last 5 or 6 weeks. And you look at the resume, and it's hard to argue against that. I do think that right now you've got to take that team seriously. And I think that you still have to deal with the fact that Philadelphia has not found a rhythm in the passing game. And we know that if Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and a healthy Devontae Smith are on the field and they are able to connect on some of those deep passes, you're kind of out of answers defensively for how you can handle them with how Saquon Barkley is running the ball as well.
And let's talk about Barkley, because he has a chance to break the NFL record set by Eric Dickerson. He has to basically average 121 yards per game down the stretch, 5 games left. He could do it in 1 more extra game, so there could be a chance where we have that kind of conversation. But he also could break it in 16 games and tie it just like Eric Dickerson did. Your thoughts on going for that record? And if he does get the record, is he the one that deserves the MVP? Because I know there's going to be a lot of conversation about him versus Josh Allen, and obviously we've seen a lot of quarterbacks win that award over the past decade.
Personally, I would like to see them go for it so that way he has a legitimate chance to win the award. I think that the conversation around MVP is better when it's not just high-profile quarterbacks at the top of the voters' minds. I think that also, I just want to see history be broken. It's going to be a long road to hoe for him. But I do think if he breaks Eric Dickerson's record, racks up the touchdowns, and it's very clear that that team maybe gets the 1 seed in the NFC or has as good a record as Detroit at the end of the year, that he deserves to get some kind of recognition, Offensive Player of the Year for certain, and he should be in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, the last running back to win MVP, Adrian Peterson, back in 2012. We had Sean Alexander, and we had Marshall Faulk. So only 3 running backs have won MVP this century, so he would be a part of a very illustrious group, dare I say Mount Rushmore of this century when it comes to running backs. Let's talk about a team that's looking for a running back and probably should have signed one of these guys in the offseason, the Dallas Cowboys. They're trying to figure out who their head coach is in the future. Jerry is playing coy. He's saying it might be Mike McCarthy. Why not? He's won a Super Bowl. What does the future look like to the Dallas Cowboys running back with McCarthy? Is this the end of an era? How do you feel about where they sit right now?
I thought at the start of the year they would have just worked out an extension and kind of quelled some of the heat that would be behind Mike McCarthy if things went sideways. I think now that Dak is obviously out for the season, this year is kind of in the tank. If I'm Dallas, you should be looking at a program guy, somebody like a Mike Vrabel. I think it would be hard to pull him from the Browns. I know he's been kind of in a consultant, amorphous role, I think, hanging around the facility there. I think that you would probably have to throw a pretty big offer to maybe peel him out of Ohio right now. And if you don't get a guy like that, maybe an Aaron Glenn, who is a Texas native, right, grew up in Houston, I think that would make a lot of sense. Players guy, that he's going to develop the defense and he's going to do things that your locker room will appreciate on game day and at practice. So guys like that, I think would probably move me most if I were a Cowboys fan. What I think you want to avoid is Jerry saying, Bill Belichick, come on down. A guy like that, or a Deion Sanders. I don't think that team needs another cult of personality in the building. I just think you want a real football coach.
Yeah, and Vrabel is definitely one of those guys. And you mentioned Aaron Glenn. That's a great call there. Shedeur Sanders, you mentioned Deion. He is going to be a conversation point. Obviously, there's a chance he's invited to the Heisman ceremony. There's also a high chance he's the number one pick, potentially. Your thoughts on Shedeur? Is he the best quarterback in this group? And is there a world where Prime and Shedeur are a package deal, maybe to the Raiders or to a team like the Cowboys?
I think Shedeur's maybe played the best of the quarterbacks in this class this season. I'm still up in the air. There are times where I watch Cam Ward and you see the ambitious throws, the arm talent, trying to extend plays, and you can fall in love with that just as quickly as you can fall out of love with the turnovers and the bad sacks that he takes. We've seen over the last 2 years, Shedeur Sanders is very dedicated to playing quarterback the right way, sometimes to his own detriment, right? You see him take sacks and maybe put the ball in harm's way because it's the right decision or the right read. I think that will play well, and I think that, you think about the legacy of the last name that he carries. I think that he kind of represents the kind of competitor you want to see at quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised at all if once all the bluster of playing for his dad is out of the door, teams really focus on who he is as a player, and I think they'll end up being more drawn to him as this pre-draft process goes on than they are right now.
And a lot of times, and I've heard this when it comes to drafts, you need to take the guy that thinks he is the number one pick. And I do feel like Shedeur Sanders thinks he is the number one pick, and that is something that is advantageous when it comes to the confidence of being that guy. So, kudos to the Sanders family for getting themselves in the position where they're going to have a Heisman Trophy winner and have, a situation where Shedeur could be the number one pick. One last thing before we let you go here, Diante. Which team, we got the college football playoff this weekend, which team are you expecting to have the most to lose based on what happens this weekend? Which game are you focusing on the most?
I'm looking at an SMU, right? If you're SMU, let's say you lose in the ACC championship game, is it really the end of the world? I don't know if it's the end of the world, but for the power games, I think Penn State and Oregon should all feel safe. Georgia and Texas, I think both of those teams are safe. And like I said, I think that SMU maybe is the only team in a power conference that should be looking over their shoulder if things go wrong when they play against Clemson. But I do feel like for the most part, this bracket is pretty well set.
Diante, we appreciate you coming on the show. Where can we find all your amazing work, man?
So I will be on the newly revamped Ringer site if you guys haven't checked it out.
Oh, yeah.
I'm working on the NFL power rankings every week so you can see how I feel about all 32 teams there. I'll be bouncing between analyzing what's happening on the field in the NFL and at the college level. And as we get closer to Christmas and the new year, there's going to be even more emphasis being spent on the NFL draft. So if you're into football, into the draft, you can find me on the Ringer, on podcasts, and in writing, talking about all those things.
Yeah, you're doing great work, man, and a lot of Shedeur Sanders content ahead. So Godspeed to you as you get ready for that. We'll be right back on the other side of the break. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks to Diante, and we'll see you on the other side of the break. There you have it for another edition of Thru the Ringer. I'm Tate Frazier. Thanks so much for joining the show. We appreciate Cousin Sal and Diante Lee for joining the show and breaking down what's happening in football. It's the best time of the year. I hope everybody's in the Christmas spirit, and we will see you next week here on Thru the Ringer.